Well, hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Dana. I'm really glad you guys are all here, and I hope that you've been enjoying and learning and growing through this series that we've been doing. And I just pray that this is going to equip you in new ways to faithfully raise mentally healthy kids. We're all in this together, and I'm just going to say a word of prayer, and then Rachel, who is a school counselor at BB in Central Arkansas, is going to come teach us about anxiety and what all that means. So let's pray. God, you are good, and we love you. Lord, we give you this Sunday morning to just learn and grow closer to you. God, we hope that our worship today is pleasing to you, and we pray that you can open our hearts to receive a message from your word. We pray all this in the name of your son, Jesus. Amen.
Okay, hey, I'm Rachel, and you're supposed to be honest with an audience if you're nervous, so I'm going to be honest and tell you I'm really nervous. Hold on one second. Okay, so my name is Rachel Wisdom, and I am a counselor at BB High School, and so just a couple of things about me, if you want to change slides. I think that is, so I graduated from Harding in 2004. Any other Harding people here? Probably a lot. No, some? Okay, so I graduated from Harding in 2004. I have a master's in education and school counseling, and I have completed all my coursework for clinical mental health licensure, so I'll be dual licensed as a therapist and as a school counselor. I have 16 years in public education, the first 12 in Memphis. I was in an inner city school in Memphis, helping seniors try to find work and what they wanted to do after high school. And then I moved to BB for a boy, which is the only reason anyone would move to BB. Just to be honest, the boy's there, and he's pretty great. He's worth it. There's nothing to eat, so after this, I might need to ask y'all what's to eat in Jonesboro, because we had one restaurant. So I am a counselor at BB High School doing something similar to what I did in Memphis, and I've been there for the past 5 years. So this is me with some of my students. My job is to help seniors graduate. I do a lot of other stuff, though, lots of clinical mental health as well, dealing with counselors, military recruiters, all the things. So I currently live there with my husband, my stepson, a dog, and a cat, who I treat, not the cat, I could give or take the cat, but I treat the dog like my child. And I'm a lifelong sufferer of chronic and clinical anxiety. So I feel like from multiple angles, maybe I am a little bit of an expert on anxiety, which is what we're kind of talking about today. So before we get started, I kind of want to ground us in my working definitions of anxiety. If we can go to the next slide. So everyone has anxiety, right? Everybody does. So we're going to talk a little bit about what kind of anxiety we're dealing with. Chronic. When I talk about chronic anxiety, we're talking about genetic or environmental, right? It's something you're born with. Your brain chemistry's always been off. It's abnormal by nature. It's disordered. Not everyone has really bad anxiety, right, all the time. It's something that you're born having to deal with. It's generalized, meaning it's not always related to a specific event. So you're just kind of always anxious. It's often illogical, right? Doesn't make sense. And as a person who has chronic anxiety, I can stay up really late, night after night, worrying about an atomic bomb. What if an atomic bomb hits us tomorrow and we're all wiped out and everybody that we love is wiped out? And you can come to me and say, Rachel, that is not logical. Like, that's not going to happen. And if it does, what can you really do about it? And if you do that to me, I might punch you in the face, because if I could talk myself out with logic of my anxiety, don't you think I would, right? So if we are chronic anxiety sufferers, we understand that that is not something we can just cure. It's not something we can fix easily. Usually it's a lifelong condition that can be managed with counseling, medication, and physical disciplines like exercise. And I have to do all of the above and will for the rest of my life, right? And then we have the other kind, which is acute. So I would call it like acute situational anxiety. And this is the kind everybody has. If you're a human being, you have had acute situational anxiety, right? It's common, it's normal, it's not disordered. Everyone experiences it. It's situational. So it's a response to a traumatic event or something that creates anxiety, like speaking in front of a group of people that makes you nervous, right? And so it's temporary, and it usually returns to normal after the event is over. Now, if you've gone through something traumatic like a divorce or a loss, you've experienced acute anxiety, but for a longer period, right? But even then, you know that when life kind of got back to normal, even if it took a while, things were okay again. And during that time, during your acute episode, you might need emotional support, therapy, medication, but it's very temporary. All right? So just a couple of things. I'm going to get my notes out really quick. I'm going to go up here so I can put my notes up here. That's okay. All right. Bear with me. Okay, so we've kind of grounded ourselves in anxiety, the definitions that I want to use. And I also understand you guys have dabbled in Anxious Generation a little bit, the Jonathan Haidt book. Raise your hand if you are familiar with John Haidt's work. Okay, that is an extremely important book for those of us in clinical mental, important enough that I'm going to refer to it a good bit in this presentation. I'll try not to do a lot of things you have already heard. So what happens when those of us in the clinical mental health world can tell you that in the last 10 to 15 years, we've seen rates of chronic anxiety skyrocket, right? And if we're looking at these two definitions, that doesn't make sense. It's not that more stressful things are happening to children necessarily, right? So what we're seeing is a kind of chronic anxiety in response to even mundane events. And I'm going to give you an example. So I'm a college counselor as well. And when you're dealing with college, you're dealing with the FAFSA, you're dealing with state scholarships like Arkansas Department of Higher Ed, you're dealing with all sorts of things that you have to do. And a lot of times that means phone calls. And y'all, the kids and the phone calls, they are terrified. So I'll have a kid come in and say, Ms. Wisdom, I haven't gotten my ADHD email yet. And I'll say, you know what that means? We're going to have to make a phone call. And it's not just like, ha-ha, it's like, right? It's like this terror reaction. And you're looking at that going, it's a phone call. Why are we having this severe anxious reaction to a mundane life skill? So what we'll do is we'll sit and we'll practice, and I'll say, hello, this is so-and-so at FAFSA. How can I help you? And they'll go and look at me like, I don't know what to say. And I'll say, how about your name? Start with your name, right? And so we'll kind of work through and we'll role play the phone call. And then we actually make the phone call, and it's crazy, right? The phone call is answered, and they look at me and they start shaking. I don't know what to say. I'll say, your name. And they'll go, Rachel. My name's Rachel. And it's like, okay, let's say it louder. I mean, it really is that way. And I'm not talking about just a few kids. I'm talking about almost all of them. And so those of us in mental health world are thinking, what is happening? Why are we having these deeply anxious, chronic reactions to the mundane activity of life? This isn't normal. It's acute situational anxiety, but it's all the time. So what's going on? So we're going to go ahead and talk just a little bit about how prevalent this is. Some people will say it's COVID. COVID did this. That is the acute event, and we're still recovering. But anyone who's been working with young people for a long time, raise your hand if you work with young people. All right, correct me if you think this is wrong. COVID just accelerated trends we were already seeing. Is that fair to say? These trends were already happening, right? COVID accelerated them. They allowed us to stay home and give into our worst impulses and not connect and not do the things. But these were happening already. So when half of young people are exhibiting these symptoms, we're going to go to the next slide. Just a couple of reminders from Haidt's work. Percentage of anxiety prevalence, we already know. This is what it's doing. And all Haidt's book did was give words to things that all of us were already seeing. And all of you were already seeing if you're working with young people. We already knew this was happening, but he validated our feelings and experiences. So obviously, we have a problem. We can go to the next slide. The prevalence of self-harm, ER visits. The number of visits for self-harm for the ER. Does anyone remember from Haidt's book the kind of ER visits that have plummeted? Does anyone remember? Lots of ER visits for this. What about broken arms? Are we getting as many of those? Why? Because nobody's going outside. Nobody's taking risks. Everyone's all worried about being safe. Well, we're not that worried about it, right? Because we've exchanged physical safety for a serious problem with emotional regulation and safety. When we're not outside taking risks, this is what happens. If you break your arm and you go to the ER, what happens the next day when you got your cast? Is it terrible? That's kind of awesome, right? Have you ever seen a little boy come to school with his cast on? He's like, Everybody sign it? It's confidence building. It's a good thing. This kind of ER visit, not so much, right? Let's go to the next slide. So this is a really disturbing number here. 46% of Gen Z and Alpha have a diagnosed mental health condition. So depression, anxiety, or ADHD, and numbers are rising. I'm actually surprised it's not higher. You know who's really concerned about this is military recruiters. So I work with them a lot, and they'll come to the school, and they talk to people, and they're not allowed to sign someone who has any history of ADHD, anxiety, or depression. Yeah, I see the face, because what does that mean? Who then? Who? Who can they recruit? Who can they sign on? And so what will happen is they have to keep lowering their standards, keep offering waivers. So now you can get in with barely able to do a physical test because they're so desperate for recruits. And they'll get a great recruit. Someone will finally go through the hoops. They'll get to MEPS, which is where they get all of their medical history, and they can't go. They can't move forward because back when they were 12, they were hospitalized for a day with a clinical mental health issue. And that makes them ineligible. So this is a crisis, and it's almost everyone. If you raise your hand if you work in schools, how many 504s you have? Is that number growing? Right? For things like, she's anxious, so she needs an extra 5 minutes to get to class so she doesn't have to talk to anyone in the hallways. No offense, guys, but come on. We're helping this child by not making her face the very thing that she's afraid of ever. That's how we're helping this child. That doesn't help her become less anxious. It makes her more anxious, right? So you all know you're seeing these problems. All right, so just a quick, I did I'm having these conversations all the time with my mental health friends. All the time we talk. With my husband, we talk about this all the time. By the way, my husband is a teacher, lifelong teacher. He's been at BB High School for many years. He teaches AP Physics 1, AP Physics 2, AP Computer Science and Chemistry, and he can tell you, teaching very hard classes, that he has seen some serious issues over the years. Kids, he doesn't teach his classes any differently, but kids are less and less willing to do the very hard work of physics, and even the very littlest challenge freaks them out, right? So he's noticing a lot of these things too in the classroom. So I did spend a lot of time in the last few weeks in preparation for this, asking my friends in clinical mental health, my counselor friends, what do you think is the problem? What's contributing to this problem? And so I am going to pull up this. Yep, we got it. The reasons. This is a very simplified summary of what my friends have said. It's technology, we all know. It's the social media, it's the video games, it's the smartphones. We all know that that's a huge culprit by now, I hope. And then it's lack of resiliency skills development. Our kids are not developing resiliency skills, that thing where you fall down and you get back up, right? Overprotection in the physical world, again, that's from Height's work. Lack of unstructured play. You're not allowed to go outside and play with your friends in the park. But you are allowed to be in your room scrolling on an iPhone, right? Unfettered. Parent over-involvement. Parents are over-parenting, right? They're overly involved in their kids' lives. Chronic isolation. They're lonely, they're isolated. Ironic, because they're connected to everyone in the world. Connected to everyone in the world. But they've never been more lonely, they've never been more isolated, right? So the disconnection and isolation in the home. And this is where things get a little bit tricky. I can't tell y'all how many kids will tell me they're yawning, they're exhausted. I was up all night. Well, what are you doing? Well, I was playing Fortnite, right? And they'll be honest. Well, what do you do when you get home? I go straight to my room. What's your mom doing? She's in her room. What's your mom doing? Scrolling Facebook. What's your dad doing? Well, he's in the living room. Doing what? Watching TV, right? So these habits are built into the home, and kids are living in isolation even in their own homes, which leads them to these attention kind of sucking device habits. The protagonist trap, which we're going to talk about a lot more later. We think that if kids are the center of the universe, it would build confidence, right? It doesn't. It does the exact opposite. If you are the center of your parents' world and everything is all about you, all that does is create misery and despair. And trust me, we're going to talk about that today. Attention fragmentation, we know that from Height's work. And then an absence of the figure it out gene. I do understand that I have a parenthesis there and not a quotation. I'm sorry. Okay, the figure it out gene. Y'all know what I'm talking about? What do I mean? Somebody, you can just talk to me. That's right. Figure it out. There's so many times, I don't know everything there is to know about college and career world. There's so many times that kid will come in and say, I need to know how to do this. And I'll say, have you tried Googling it? what do I Google? Well, I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to figure out what to Google. What do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to sit here and Google things until I figure it out. Why can't you do that? In fact, in my old job, where I taught a class called Senior Seminar every day, we had a written rule in our class. If you can't show me your Google history where you tried to figure it out yourself, I won't help. The second you show me that you really tried to figure it out on your own, then I'll help, right? So we have an absence of the figure it out gene. Truly, I have students come to my room all the time. I'd like to apply to A-State. Like that, A-State, Jonesboro? Anyway, I'd like to apply to A-State. I'm like, okay, what do I do? Google, I'd like to apply to A-State. So then they'll do it, and at the very top it says, apply to Arkansas State University, and they go, now what do I do? Say, you click, apply to Arkansas State University. Now what? See that big red button that says apply? Click that. And I'm not exaggerating. That's really what it's like. And so it's an absence of the figure it out gene, just the ability to dive in and figure something out on your own. That doesn't build confidence. That creates a ton of anxiety over the smallest, tiniest things. All right, so this is where we pause before I dive in much more with some disclaimers. I want to say this. Oftentimes people will say, it's not harder to parent now. It's just different. They're wrong. I believe they're wrong. And so before we move forward, I want to ground us in the reality that I don't believe it has ever been harder in modern history to be a parent. You're literally fighting against tech billionaires whose whole life is about trying to addict and depress and keep your child anxious. It is Goliath, and we're David with our little slingshot. And it makes me emotional because I know so many parents who are trying, and it's so hard, and it feels impossible. And I want to hold space for the fact that it has never been harder. If you're a parent, raise your hand if you're a parent. Are we all parents? If you're a parent, you're up against this Goliath that we've never seen. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. And when your kid comes home and says, Mom, I'm the only one who doesn't have this smartphone or this Instagram account, they might be right. They might actually be right. And so you're up against it in a way we've never seen in modern history. And I want to say we know from that story in the Bible that David did kill Goliath by the power of God. And so I want to say by the power of God, it is possible to reclaim the lives of our children. It is possible. But I want to hold space for the fact that it is very hard. Second disclaimer, I do not have biological children, and I want to own that because you guys might think, well, it's easy for her to say. Okay, that's fair. I do have a stepson who is 17 and is going to graduate soon from BB High School, and my husband and I have had to really navigate these things, and it is not for the faint of heart. All right, third, anytime we're talking about clinical mental health or children or parenting, we're going to talk in generalizations, especially when we have 50 minutes to talk about it. So please know I know there are exceptions. I know that there are times when something I might say that feels too black and white is not true, and I would love to talk about those things. And if I say something that is too blunt or offensive, I will provide my email and phone number at the end. I'm happy for pushback. All right, so those disclaimers aside, we can go to the next slide, sorry. So a kind of a final quote from a therapist friend of mine. If parents got very serious about making common sense rules about technology, social media, and video games, limiting access and making real world effort to block addiction, I would no longer have a job. She believes it's such a problem that it would literally work her out of a job if we didn't have that anymore. So I spend a lot of time, and we're going to talk about technologies just for a second, talking to kids about technology. And they get sick of it. They do. And I say, are you sick of having people talk to you about your phone habits? They're like, yes. Does anyone want to guess what is the number one piece of pushback I get? Anyone want to guess? Huh? They don't like that. But anyone want to guess why they're sick of hearing it from adults? Because adults are doing it too. Exactly right. Well, my mom is on her phone all the time. My dad has Fox News on like a morphine drip. He always has one game on, the TV, and then another on his lap, right? You hear that all the time. My mom is always scrolling through Facebook and looking at Instagram Reels all the time. That's what, and what do I say? They're right. They're right that we are all addicted too. I have an addiction to my phone. I'm on my phone way too much, and I can come up with an excuse. We're building a house right now. I always need to look at this fixture and that fixture and text our contract. Like, right? There's always an excuse and a reason to be on the phone. But the reality is, if we can't have a real conversation around our own habits and our own use, how we help our kids with anxiety, honestly, is a moot point. If we're not willing to deal with our own habits and our own vices, our own mental health, to do the healthy things we need to do to be healthy ourselves, what's the point, right? So that is what I'm going to really ask you to do and think about during this time. And I'm thinking about it too. Like even in preparation for this, I thought, oh man, that means I'm gonna have to think about this too. All right, so parenting styles, just a quick thing before we move on. I wanna remind us, this is Psychology 101. Has anyone seen this before? Okay, you've seen this before? All right, so this is kind of a traditional way of looking at parenting. They say authoritarian, this is high expectations, low support. Anyone have an authoritarian parent, wanna admit it? This is my way or the highway, you do what I say, I don't care how you feel about it, I'm the mom, right? And, well, can you explain why? No, that's it. And I'm not gonna give you the tools to do it either. You go figure it out. We do want them to have the figure it out gene, but that's a little extreme, right? So then we have the permissive parent, low expectations, high support. You don't have to do that, baby, I'll do that for you. I'll take care of that, right? You don't really have to do anything. Another brand of this is a lot of empty threats. That's another type of permissive parent. Y'all ever seen that at Walmart? A parent carting their kid around, if you do this one more time. And then what happens when they do it one more time? Absolutely nothing. That's permissive parents. Not good. Neglect is low expectations, low support. So we don't have any expectations of you at all. Also, we're not even really there. And I'll tell you that for a long time, this kind of looked a certain way. It looked like latchkey kids. It looked like I'm home alone all the time. Guess what the most common form of neglect is now? Anyone know? Constant access to devices. Parents who are letting devices raise their children, parents who have no structure around media at all. That's a form of neglect, and I'm telling you, we're seeing it all the time. Okay, authoritative, this is obviously the good one. We want high expectations and high support. We say, here are my expectations. This is what it is. I am the parent, and you're the child, so this is just what it's gonna be. You have a question? Absolutely, what's your question? I love you so much. Here are the tools that you need to do this thing I'm asking you to do. Right? And so, does anyone want to guess what parenting style produces the worst outcomes in adulthood? Permissive. It's the permissive neglect. But you know what psychologists would say? Even the neglect has better outcomes because at least they had to do some figuring it out. They didn't have an adult there telling them all the time what to do and doing things for them. By far, the parenting style that creates the least satisfied kids are the permissive homes because they have no idea how to follow structured rules. They don't know what to do when they're not in charge, right? What parents are doing is creating a world in their home that doesn't look anything like the world out there. So when they get out into the world out there, they have no idea what to do. So another disclaimer. We can be the best, most perfect parents in the world and still have bad outcomes, right? That's true. We all know in here from hearing heartbreaking stories, or maybe you represent a heartbreaking story in your own life. You did everything you could. You did this stuff and it still didn't work out because we don't have total control. And that's important to say. But with certain kinds of parenting, you can give your kid a better chance. And if we do the permissive thing, if we let them do what they want and we let them be in charge, we're giving them the worst chance. And that's important to note. All right. Another disclaimer here too. I think a lot of us who are Gen X millennials, raise your hand if you're Gen X or millennial. I'm millennial, my husband is Gen X. He's a lot older than me, 2 years. So a lot of us were raised by maybe authoritarian parents who said, this is it. I'm not gonna listen to your feelings. This is just what it is. So what have we done? In an earnest effort, too many of us, way over here. Whatever you think, baby, yes, I hear you. Okay, we don't have to do that, right? We're so afraid of being the parent who doesn't listen that we've done the opposite thing, right? And so for many of us, what we've got to think about is balance. All right, we can go to the next slide. One of Haidt's basic ideas that I think is so important is that children are inherently anti-fragile. What does that mean? When children are inherently anti-fragile? You can just tell me. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So let's go all the way back. What happens when a little kid, let's say a toddler, what happens when they fall, when they hurt themselves and they fall down? What do they do first? They look at, who do they look at? Their parents. What are they looking for? A reaction. What if you go, then what do they do? Right? What if you say, oh my goodness, are you okay? Let's hop up. Let's look. Are you all right? Up. Let's dust off. You're okay. Then what do they do? Okay. Right? So Hyde's idea is that psychologically, kids are pretty anti-fragile. They bump their head. They get up. They're all right. Not always. Let's not take it to an extreme, right? We're not like sending them out to, but they're anti-fragile. They'll bounce back on their own. We make them fragile. That's what Hyde says. We make kids fragile. They don't come out that way. And so some of the ways, so what I would say as a mental health worker who's working with teenagers all the time is that it is what we're seeing with the chronic anxiety is a direct result of chronic fragility. It's chronic fragility. And I do want to recommend a book. It's also by Haidt and a different author I can't remember now, called The Coddling of the American Mind. Has anyone read this book before? Okay. So one of his main premises is if we are fragile, we're going to be more anxious, period. If we're fragile, we're not going to be resilient. That goes for all of us, right? All right. So a couple of things. I want to go to the next slide for just a second. With all this in mind, how am I on time? Okay. What parents should know, these are just some highlights based on what we talked about with therapists. How can we work to making our kids less fragile, which will make them less anxious? It's okay to change the rules. That's something I want to say. If you're going through all of these elephants in the room and you're talking about Haidt and you're doing all these things and you're listening today and you're thinking, man, the toothpaste is out of the tube. My kid already has their phone in their room all night. I can't go back. Yes, you can. Will it be hard? Yeah. But what Haidt says is you are the parent. You can change the rules at any time. Now, of course, the longer you wait, the harder it'll be. But I can give you my stepson as an example. I was 13, I was not 13 when I met him. That's odd. Anyways, he was 13, though, when I came into his life, and my husband would admit that because of COVID, he fell into a trap that a lot of other people did, allowing too much screen access. And so we knew this is a problem. He's addicted. We've got to walk this back. And we did a lot. The rules that we developed together were pretty strict by comparison to what he was used to. Was it easy? Heck no. There are moments I look back on and think, that was a bloodbath. That was brutal. And I'm really glad we're past that. But we stuck to it. We knew it would be awful, and it was, but it wasn't awful for as long as I thought it would be. We were consistent, we stuck to it, and it became a lot less of a fight. And we've had to adjust our rules as we've gone, but he's 17 now. He still has screen limits and a timer, still. Does he ever question it? Almost never. He just does it because he's used to it, right? You can change the rules. And sometimes we have to change the rules based on new information. And an example I came up with was thinking about Netflix, for example. How many of our kids just have access to Netflix? And some of it's parent naivete, right? We grew up, network TV was probably mostly fine, right? Nothing, no big deal. Y'all seen Netflix lately? My husband and I, we came home from school and looked at each other and were like, every kid has watched the Dahmer show on Netflix or the Ed Gein story. All of them. They shouldn't be watching that, right? So maybe these parents are just naive. They don't realize what's actually on Netflix, the kind of stuff that kids can access. They shouldn't be watching that stuff. That's incredibly dangerous stuff for an undeveloped brain. It's dangerous for us. It's not good for me either, right? And so what we say is, whoa, I didn't realize this stuff was available on Netflix. This isn't because I don't trust you. You didn't do anything wrong. All you did was get curious about something and watched it. Anyone would do that. But based on new information, we're going to have to block Netflix, right? We're taking that back. You can change the rules based on new information. I think that's a really important thing to note. So teens are also, what we'd say, it's also, whenever parents talk about how their life is really easy with their teenager, I kind of go, huh? We never have conflict with our teenager. That doesn't actually sound good to me as a mental health professional. It sounds to me like maybe we're not doing something right. If you never have conflict, you never butt heads with your kid, that doesn't sound right. Because by nature, teens are designed to buck the rules and challenge the rules. That's what they're doing. They're in a phase of development where they're trying to understand and be who they are, and they're trying to understand why they're not in charge and you are. So if you're never having a paddle of wills with them ever, now again, there's exceptions here. Some of you have extremely compliant kids. There might be a different issue going on there that we might need to talk about, right? But in general, if everything in your home is always peaceful, it's probably because you don't have enough boundaries. That's just being real. It's okay to say no. It's okay for your kids to be mad at you. You have to make kids do things they don't want to do. That's an important one here. I can't tell you how many conversations I'll have with parents. I'll call a parent and be like, so-and-so is sleeping in pretty much every class. They're always asleep. Their grades are really slipping. What's going on? Well, he's just in his room all night playing video games. I can't get him to stop. And I kind of go, what do you mean you can't get him to stop? You take the video games out of the room is what you do. Well, he'd hate me if I did that. Well, okay. Right? So it is okay for your kid to be mad at you. That's something I wish parents would know. It is okay. That's happened to us plenty of times. I was mad at my mom all the time, and she's my best friend now. You know what? If I'd never been mad at her as a child, I bet I'd be mad at her now. And I would talk about that more in a little bit. All right. So when I say it is okay to make kids do things, please know I do not mean you grab them by the nape of the neck and drag them to do something. That is not what I mean. What I mean is you're right. Your kid won't go outside and exercise. You're right that your kid is never outside doing things. I get it, because video games are an option, because screens are an option. As long as they're an option, they're going to choose it because it is made to addict them. So one of the things that we tried and implemented in our home that I stole from a friend and that I recommend to a lot of people is what you do is you say, for every hour of screen time, you are going to do something for your mind, your body, your spirit. And then to that, I added an act of service towards somebody else. We still limit the screen time. You don't get copious amounts, but these things you do first. When you get home, you go on a walk. It doesn't have to be some crazy exercise, but you have to go on a walk, right? You have to put something healthy in your body. You have to do something for your mind, something healthy for your mind. Then you do something for your spirit. Maybe you, for us, what we would tell my stepson who is autistic, so he has social difficulties, right? We'd say for him, the spiritual act might be reaching out to a friend and connecting. That's the spiritual act for him, right? And then we add an act of service. So you have to observe and look and see what somebody else might need and then meet that need without being acts. And for us, it has to be unprompted. If we say, hey, there's an act of service, right? It doesn't count. And of course, early on, we would say, here's some ideas. But over time, you scaffold them out of that and let them do that on their own. So that's what I mean by making them do things they don't want to do. Right? So they might say, you know what, fine, I don't need screen time then. I don't want to do any of that stuff. Okay, guess how long that'll last. Right? The other thing is you have to let them be bored. It's okay if they're bored. It's okay if they're sitting there and really bored. What Brene Brown, anyone knows what she says about boredom? If we don't ever allow our kids to be bored, they're never creative. They never learn to think or do on their own, and that's absolutely true. It is okay for our kids to be bored. All right, so I want to briefly, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Sorry. Okay, so we need to resist solving your child's problems for them. You guys have done this in Heights work. I won't go on about this. Kids are more capable of doing hard things than we think they are, and they'll do it if there's no other option. They will. If you don't rescue them, they'll figure it out eventually. We're not helping kids by making life easier for them. We're actually blocking them from the very experiences they need to build confidence, resilience, and pride in themselves. Right? Kids are anxious because they don't have any empowerment to do on their own. Meaningful embodied connection is vital for healthy development. That means less technology, usually a lot less. And again, the really hard part is that means that for us too, right? A lot less technology. So does anyone, we can go to the next slide. We used to talk about helicopter parenting. And any of you who work with young people, you'd say, I would give anything to go back to that phase. Helicopter parenting was frustrating, but not nearly like what we got now, which is lawnmower parenting. What is lawnmower parenting? Anyone? You can call it out. Anyone know? Yeah, you're clearing the path ahead. You're running ahead and mowing the path, and so that they have a nice little easy way through, right? And so we think this is going to make our kids' lives so easy. What is it actually doing? It's making it harder. It's making them incapable. You're going ahead and clearing the path. We say we prepare the child for the road, not the road for the child, right? All right, so anyone heard, we can go to the next slide, of the playground experiment? I'm running out of time here, so I'm trying to hurry. The playground experiment, anyone know? 2 psychologists watch, they observe, they split an elementary class into 2. They take one side of that class to a playground that has a fence, another side to a playground that doesn't have a fence. What do you think they observed? Yes, so the kids who had the fence, they were running around, playing, having a great time, all at ease, running around the perimeter, exploring. What were the kids without the fence doing? They're all huddled around their teachers. They wouldn't budge. They had no idea what to do. Right? They don't feel free. They feel anxious and scared because they don't have boundaries. They don't know how to explore, right? And so I want to say, because so much of this, and I'm running out of time so much more quickly than I hoped, I want to say this too, that so much of parenting is walking by faith, not by sight, right? So much of parenting is doing the things, walking faithfully forward, even though you can't see by sight the results. And I want to give you a little bit of an anecdote to help you understand what this looks like. So I have a great kid who I love a lot, still love. She graduated last year. She had 2 siblings in her same grade. They all graduated at the same time. Parents were married when they were young. They divorced. She goes with mom, who's a very permissive parent. They go with dad, who I would say is an authoritarian parent. I would say he's too strict. Too many expectations, not enough support. They've kind of mellowed over time. So she would tell me that over the years, she was so glad she didn't have to go with her dad because they butt heads, he's too strict, all the things. Her siblings have a very a successful life. They had a ton of options. They had a ton of colleges to choose from. They're connected. They're part of a youth group. They're very respectful. They have some issues to work through because of some of the authoritarian stuff, but they're doing really well, whereas she has gone from relationship to relationship that's ended terribly. She has truancy issues. She's very smart, but doing very poorly in school. So this child sits in my office at the end of the year when it's dawning on her that she has no options after high school. Does anyone want to guess what she said to me? She said this sobbing, and she looks up at me and she says, "Miss Wisdom," anyone want to guess? "I went with the wrong parent." She looks at me and says, "I went with the wrong parent." And she knows. And she's telling me my mom was always my friend. She wasn't my parent. And she's not saying it in a sweet way. She's saying she didn't care. She knows it's a sign that her mom didn't actually care. She said, "My dad was strict, but at least he cared." Right? Now, you think she's going to go home and tell her mom and dad that? No way. Because she still wants what she wants. She's a kid, right? But what she's telling me is the actual truth of what she knows to be true. It was never her job to give herself what she needed over what she wanted. It was her mother's job. Kids know, y'all, even if they don't tell you. And I could tell you 1,000 stories like that. I meet with my niece who's 15. Every single week we go to ice cream together. And I always call my sister ahead and say, "What am I walking into? Give me some context," right? So I know what questions to ask. And I'll ask questions. My sister, "Well, it's been a doozy. We've been battling and battling. So I just wish I could get her to say this thing." And then my niece will just say it to me, the thing that she really wishes she would say to her. And I'm like, "Well, she just said it really easily." "Why won't she say that to me?" "Because she wants what she wants." But you have to trust that even if they're telling you something different, they know. They know. So much of parenting is walking by faith, not by sight. We trust that we're doing the right things and giving them what they need, even if it doesn't seem like it. All right, so I'm going to skip through a little bit. We can go to the next slide. So we know not only from, and I won't read these verses because we don't have time, we know not just from the playground experiment, from modern psychology, we know from Scripture that when we do what we want all the time, it doesn't actually make us free. It enslaves us. It makes us anxious. So we hear in Romans 6 that these acts of so-called freedom that actually destroy your freedom. Isn't that brilliant? We know that these acts of so-called freedom actually destroy freedom. When we give our kids all this freedom they're not ready for, we're actually destroying their freedom, right? We can go to the next one. We know from Galatians 5 that it's absolutely clear that God has called you to a free life. But if you use your freedom in a bad way, you're going to get less freedom. Whereas if we use our freedom to serve each other in love, that's how freedom grows, right? We can go to the next slide. I'm going through this so fast. So let's talk about feelings really quick. If we're worried about validating feelings, which especially if we were not validated as children ourselves, it's important to remember that feelings, I love this quote from Dallas Willard, I use it all the time with my kids, are great servants, but they make terrible masters, disastrous masters, right? So if I go to my husband and say, "I'm so mad at you because you did this and this and this," I've never done that. I've done that before. Those conversations don't go very well, right? Is that fair to say? Yeah, they don't go very well. Whereas if I say, I'm feeling angry, I'm not sure if it's fair, but I'm going to go talk to my husband about it. Can we talk this out? Those conversations go very well because I'm letting my feelings inform me. I'm feeling this way. It might mean this or it might mean this. I need to investigate that, right? But if I'm mastered by my feelings, it goes terribly. And what I'm seeing now with this kind of parenting is we're teaching children to be ruled by their feelings. But the problem is we are also ruled by them. My teacher said this to me today. What did she do? And we're immediately calling her boss. We're doing all this stuff, right? What if you don't understand the situation because of what your child told you entirely? But we're being ruled by our feelings and teaching our children that it doesn't matter about anybody else. This is how I feel, right? So we have to learn to listen to our child's feelings. And by the way, my stepson has tried to tell us before, you're not listening to me. And my husband will lovingly say, you mean I'm not doing what you want me to do. I am listening to you. I heard you. I can understand why you want this thing. I would want this thing too. But I'm wiser than you, and I understand that if I give you this thing, it won't be what you need. Listening does not mean doing what they say. And I think a lot of parents have fallen into this trap of thinking listening to their children means we don't make them do something they don't want to do. That's not what it means. All right. So prioritizing, I think it's super important. Hold on. Sorry. I'm trying to skip some things, y'all. I'm over-prepared. So one of the things that happens, we get some mixed messages when our children think their feelings matter. What happens when they do matter? You know what I mean? Matter too much. Then we get into the real world where everybody else was raised that way. Everybody's feelings are the most important. So then what? What do kids do, right? They get these mixed messages. All right, so we're going to talk really quickly about the center of the universe protagonist. Can we, we're going to go through these really quick. This is all heights, the virtual world versus the real world. One of the best things we can do for our kids, you can go through those. You've seen this before, hopefully. One of the best things we can do is really work hard to give them real world experiences that are embodied in person, together, synchronous, happening at the same time, one-to-one, high bar for entry and exit. You apologize when you do wrong, all the things. We need to be doing that at home. He goes through several things, and I added some here. You can keep going. Let's go to the next slide. So shared sacredness, you're doing that right now. You're doing that for your kids now by being here in a shared sacred space. It's okay to make them go to youth group, by the way. They may not want to. It's okay to make them. It's okay to greatly incentivize them. Okay, scroll to the next. Embodiment, eating meals together. If I could recommend one thing for a family to do, it'd be start eating your meals together at a table, even if it's takeout, even if it's pizza. Get your plates out, sit together, ask each other. You can have a frame. My sister has your highlight from the day, your low light from the day. They do that every night, and it creates conversation. Next, and this is the one I want to park at the rest of our time. Transcending the self. We talked about this earlier. The problem that we're seeing with anxious kids is that they have not been taught to transcend the self. They've been taught that it's all about them. What social media does is it makes you the protagonist. What video games does is it make you the protagonist. When you're in charge of your home as a child, you are the protagonist. So many parents, their whole lives revolve around their child. And that's a hard trap not to fall into, I understand. But parents have to have their own lives. They have to have marriages that they're attending to. It doesn't actually make children less anxious to be the center of the world. It makes them more anxious. It makes them more confused, right? So one example I like to give, and again, there's so much here we could talk about. I remember distinctly a moment when I battled with my mom all the time. Y'all, it was rough. I was a difficult teenager to raise. And I remember we had this particularly big fight, and I knew I was in the wrong. But I wasn't about to be like, I was so wrong, Mom. I'm so sorry. I walked in, and she was in the kitchen washing the dishes. I'm like, what you doing? Hey, Mom. Been good? How are you? And she whipped around and looked at me and said, I need space from you. And she got very teary. See, I get teary thinking about this. You've hurt me. I'm a person. You've hurt my feelings, and I need a break from you. I need you to go away and leave me alone. I will let you know when I'm ready. And I know people who would say, well, that's not very nice. She's not listening to your feelings. But you know what she was doing? She was teaching me that I'm responsible for other people. It's not just about me. I can hurt somebody. I have to make repair. If I hurt, I need to make repair. Who will teach our children that if not us? If not their parents? We're human beings, and our children need to understand that if they hurt, They need to make repair. Because what's happening is they're coming out into the world believing they are the center. It's only them that matters, nobody else. And I should just be able to enter and exit as I please. Right? So one thing to remember, I think, y'all, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to figure out how to end this. So I think a lot of us are worried to make rules because we're afraid of rebellion, right? If we make rules that are too strict, our kids will rebel. And I often say to parents, yeah, they will. Yes, they will. I did. I know that. They will rebel. So does that mean we don't make the rules? So because we're making the rules, they'll rebel, so we just don't make rules? No, what it means is that we make the rules, expect them to rebel, but be ready. What my mom always says is we're going to prepare little sticks for the nest for when they come home. And I have to tell you guys, what I believe and what every mental health professional will tell you is what's creating anxious kids are kids who don't have a framework at all. They were never raised with a framework. Their kids are so afraid because of the fundamentalist parents. They grew up in a fundamentalist religion that was authoritarian that said, here are the rules. When it comes to premarital sex, here are the black and white rules, but we're not going to talk about it, right? That's authoritarian. So many of us grew up with that kind of thinking, and we're so afraid that we're going the other way and not creating rules at all. Here's the thing. My parents taught me so many amazing things. They were so intentional with me, and I didn't always do what they told me to do. But when I came to the end of myself, when I was living an anxious life, I went through a divorce. I made very poor decisions and faced a lot of consequences. I knew what to do. I had a roadmap. I had something I could point to say, okay, this isn't good, but I remember what my parents told me. It isn't about you. Serve somebody else. Think about somebody else, right? And I had a way back. What we're seeing now is so many anxious kids who are so unhappy and they don't know why. They're so unhappy and they don't know why, and they don't have a roadmap back. And that's creating so much anxiety. Our job as parents is not to do and say the exact right thing to make sure that they'll do all the things. Our job as parents is to make sure they know why and they have a roadmap back, right? Without a framework, we become very anxious, and that's what we're seeing in this very anxious generation. So our kids need to be pointed towards a life of living not for themselves, but of course that means we also must live that way. If we're living a life for ourselves, our kids are going to pick up on that. They need to see us pouring ourselves out in service and love, not focus on what we want or letting our feelings master us. Right? If they see us living that way, that's how they're going to learn to live. So if the question I was given was, how do we help our kids with anxiety? How do we help combat that? Yes, get the medication, please. Don't be resistant to that. But it can't be the only thing. Make sure they're going outside. Make sure they're visiting, connecting. Get them therapy. Don't be afraid of therapy. If it's a good therapist, they're going to know what's going on. They're going to help you a lot. Don't be afraid of that. But those aren't the only solutions. If we're not doing these other things, it won't work. It won't work. It's all of the above, right? So I wanted to end with, I know it's about time for us to go. I wanted to end with a long quote from Galatians 5 that I won't end with. So just really quickly, I'm going to add my email to the end if you want to email me. So, but there's a contract if you want to scroll back through. Does anyone follow Jonathan Haidt on social media? Okay, good. If you don't, I recommend it. He has so many good resources, especially for social media and smartphones, but for a lot of things, for the overprotective parenting. This is a contract. A woman read his book and then created a contract for her kids. And this was what it said. And I love this so much, not because I think the rules are great, because I think they are. I think the rules are brilliant. But really because I love the the tone of her authoritative parenting, right? You are valuable. You are important. That's why I'm willing to make these rules. You're too important not to, right? I own this phone. You deserve some privacy, but not all, right? So a very authoritative tone. You can see things about bedtime, passcodes. If it rings, it's me, answer it, right? All these rules. And she says, if they break the rules, they lose the phone, period. So this is a brilliant thing. I wanted to make handouts, but I didn't want to throw it in y'all's face. And so I do have my email address at the end. If you're interested, either follow Jonathan Haidt, it's there, his contract, or email me and I'll send you a copy. So the very end here, thank y'all for listening to me babble on. what I really like is to interact and have people talking back with me, but because of the time constraint, we couldn't do that. So feel free to email me. I'm a counselor at BB High School. This is my personal email address and my cell phone. If you feel like I left something out or misrepresented something, I'm happy to hear that pushback. But thank y'all for listening to me talk for almost an hour. And thank you. I have multiple friends who will reach out and say to me, Rachel, like, I'm not giving my kid social media and she's mad at me all the time. How long can we withstand this? And I always say, I can't imagine how hard that must be. That's got to be so hard. Keep up the good work. Hold down. Someday they will be so grateful. And again, will it always have the best outcome? No, but we're giving them the best chance. And I'm going to stop talking.
That was really great. Thank you so much. Lots of awesome points. So I'm going to pray for us. But also we have the box if you want to write your questions out for the next few sessions that we have. So on your way out, if you want to mark the questions, go ahead and do that, or you can do the QR code. All right, I'll pray for us. Father God, thank you for today. Thank you for our time together. Thank you for the words of wisdom and the wise counsel. Father, I pray that we can apply these words to our lives as we are learning how to grow young disciples. We love you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.